We're going to pick up the reading from verse 23 of Acts chapter 19.
The riot in Ephesus. About that time there arose a great disturbance about the way. A silversmith called Demetrius, who made silver shrines for Artemis, brought in a lot of business for the craftsmen there. He called them along together, and along with the workers in related trades said, "You know, my friends, that we have received a good income from this business. And you see and hear how Paul and his fellows are convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole of the province of Asia. He says that gods made by human hands are not gods at all. There is a danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited. And the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, would be robbed of her divine majesty." When they heard this, they were furious and began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" Soon the whole city was in uproar. The people seized Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's travelling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theatre together. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province, friends of Paul, sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theatre. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a difference before the people. But when they realised he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison, for he was for about 2 hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." The city clerk quietened the crowd and said, "Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they are neighbours they have neither robbed temple nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the court are open and there are proconsuls. They can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of becoming charged in riot because of what is happening today. In that case, we would not be able to account for our commotion. Since there is no reason for this, after he had said this, he dismissed the assembly." This is the word of the Lord.
Wonderful. Say good morning, everyone. Oh, it's lovely to be here with you today, despite the horrible weather outside. Right. So, today I thought that I would start by telling you all a little bit about myself, because you've obviously never heard me speak before, and most of you probably don't know me too well yet. And I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about my daily routine. So it starts, as all of yours do, with waking up. Now, I'm not a morning person, so this can take me a good while. But then I read my Bible, even if it's only for a few minutes, before getting ready and heading to work. Then, once I'm at work, I look at all the various things I need to do. I respond to emails, I meet with people, I make lesson plans, all those sorts of things that are part of my job. And if I have any spare moments, I read my Bible. Then when I go home in the evening, I'll watch something and maybe read my Bible at the same time, or cook dinner and read my Bible. And then finally, I go back to bed and I read my Bible until I fall asleep. Now, if you heard that story without what I'm about to tell you, you would think that I'm probably quite a holy and devoted person. But the reality of my day is quite different. You see, all the times that I said that I read my Bible are times that I'll be checking my phone. And I guess this is a thing for most people, that you check your phone first thing in the morning. It's just a reflex action. And mostly, you check your phone last thing at night. And if there's any spare moments in the day, you just automatically do it because it's just a reflex. So that's what happens when my mind wanders. And that is what I spend my time doing. And that is the question that I want to ask you all today. What do you spend your time on? In this passage in Acts, we see a society that worships false gods and idols. And I wonder today, do any of you know what an idol is? Can anyone tell me a definition?
Man-made image of a god.
Man-made image of God.
Something that you worship and aspire to and you want to be like.
Definitely. So, false gods or idols are defined as the worship or adoration of anyone or anything other than the Lord God. And this includes the worship of other gods from other religions, images, idols, statues people have made themselves. It includes the whole breadth of that. So none of us do that, right? Or at least we think we don't. None of us worship other gods or statues that we built ourselves. So we're all good. We can go home. We can put our feet up. We're fine. Well, unfortunately, that's wrong. When we look at the topic of idols and false gods, we often turn a blind eye as to the smaller things in our life that can take our attention away from God, thinking that only the really, really bad stuff, like worshipping another god or wanting loads and loads of money and being full of greed, are things that count. But at times, idolatry stems from the good things in our life. Idolatry has taken different forms throughout the ages of history. Some idols were carved out of wood and covered with precious metals. Some were well-known pagan deities to which we still have the temples built today. But today, our idols seem a little bit more sophisticated. We have money, power, reputation, appearance, and even knowledge are common idols. And our phones, yeah, as you just said, our phones are one as well. Even good things can become idols in our society, such as the local church or a ministry, because an idol is simply that which we elevate in our lives above God. If you don't take anything else away from what I say today, please know this. Idolatry is simply what occupies our time. Idolatry is what comes first in our mind, what has captured our hearts, and where we find our identity. The world is filled with things that can capture our hearts and define who we are. We're defined by what we do, where we live, what hobbies we have, and these can all become our identity. Reflecting on my own life as I was writing this, my relationship with my now fiancé, Ben, is included in this. When we first got together, me and Ben agreed that God would be at the center of our relationship and that he would be what came first. Now, this was true for a while at the beginning, but then I fell in love with Ben, as so often happens, and that captured my heart. He was the first thing I thought about in the morning, and the last thing I thought about at night. He occupied the majority of my time. Now, most people would see that as just a normal love story. But I'm so glad me and Ben noticed this really early on and confronted it, as it wouldn't have been healthy for either of us or our relationships with God. You see, I love Ben, and I love him with all of my heart, and I'm getting married to him, so that's pretty obvious. But we both agreed that God comes first. As Ben and I like to say to each other, we're just gifts from God to each other, but God is our main relationship. So another example I have of this is I'm quite an avid video game fan. I know that most of you probably don't play video games, but I had this idea of just imagine if one day I got the latest game. I absolutely love the game Zelda, so let's talk about that. So imagine I got it, the new game, and I decided to start playing it, and I fell in love with it. I played it all the time. When I woke up in the morning, I wanted to play it. When I was going to bed, I was like, oh, I'll play the game. Now imagine just before getting the game, I decided that every day this year, I would spend time every morning reading my Bible and praying. But I just kept playing and playing the game. And then one day I woke up and I wanted to play the game, but it was time for church. And I knew I was on Lighthouse in the morning, and I decided, I really just want to stay home and play this game. So I lied, and I was like, I'm ill today, I'll just stay home. And I played the game, and I would just imagine if I was just sat there. And I was like, what am I doing? Isn't it a big problem if I had done that? I did something bad and I lied about it. But most of all, I let that game come between me and God. Nothing's wrong particularly with the game. It's not really rude or really violent. It's just a fun game. The problem is what the game would have led me to do. The game would have become my God because it was all I was giving my time and attention to. God doesn't want us to be miserable in our lives. He doesn't want us to do nothing and know no one and want nothing of our lives. He just wants us to spend time with him and to think of him first before anything else. So looking back to our passage, we see a man called Demetrius who is only concerned about money and not the god Artemis he supposedly worships. First, when he speaks, he says, speaking first of his money in verse 25, where he says, you know, my friends, that we receive a good income from this business. He doesn't even mention the goddess he supposedly worships. He mentions that later on in verse 27. But first, he mentions his business again and his income. His heart has been captured by a greed and a need for money. And that is what he spends his time thinking about. It's the first thing that comes to his mind when he sees this problem in Ephesus, that's the one. And then later on in the passage, we see a crowd in the city who end up shouting for 2 whole hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." They're so blindly devoted to this that their time is just meaningless. They spend 2 whole hours shouting about this false goddess. And that seems ridiculous to us. I mean, it seems ridiculous to me. But then I think about, what do we spend our lives shouting about? We can look at this passage and see little relevance. But the fact is, people today do this in their own way. People shout this in their words, in their action, in their time spent, and in their money spent. Great is my sports team. Great is my political party. Great is TikTok. Great is the consumer economy. Great is my phone. Great is my popularity. Great is going out partying and getting drunk. Like, sometimes we are blind to the things that can capture our hearts and the things that we shout about and the things that can draw us away from God. And sometimes we don't even notice when it's happening. Now, please know that this is not me trying to make you feel guilty. The fact is, we all struggle with this. It's a constant battle of what we spend our time on. The thing we need to know is we just need to be aware of what could be drawing us away from God. And so I ask that question again. What is it you spend your time on? Controversial as it may be, I believe that we commit idolatry on a daily basis, purely because sometimes, some days, we just don't leave time for God. It's easy to do, I know I have. When you get swept up in the craziness of life, be it work, school, marriage, your friends, or exams, or anything that is happening, it's easy to let our mind and our time be devoted to those things in our life, rather than the one our life comes from. So again, what is it you spend your time on? So today we had a bit of a shorter time because I wanted to give you time and space on this now. So we're going to have a few minutes of reflection on that question, where I want you to think about the things in your life that may already be a problem, the things that you devote your time to and you realize are actually taking you away from God, or the things that you see that might become a problem, things that you're like, I love this and I'm devoted to this. It might not be anything you've put before God now, but think about the game. It could become something. So we're going to have some time now, and there's pieces of paper and pens on your table. And I want you, if you really feel prompted by God in this time, to write down on those pieces of paper what God's telling you. And then my challenge for you is this week to either do one of two things. To keep that piece of paper with you throughout the week to remind you. Be it put it in the back of your phone, put it as a reminder on your phone, be it put it in the front of your Bible, put it in your diary, put it somewhere that is going to trigger that memory of what I've talked about today. Or the other challenge is take your piece of paper and take it up to the church, the main church building, and lay it before the cross. Because there's no better place to bring those things than to the foot of Jesus.